Welcome to Skybeam. Thank you for visiting our website and viewing this short video on connecting your Linksys wireless router to our internet service. Let's begin. Now before we make any connections, let's be sure we have everything we need. Our installer has supplied you with a power over Ethernet connection that supplies the electrical power to the radio installed on the outside of your home. It should look like this. The unit will have an Ethernet cable plugged into it that comes from the outside, and a label that says To Radio. The flat part of the cable, labeled To Computer, plugs into the WAN or Internet port of the router. Keep this handy, as we'll make this connection shortly. Next, let's take a look at the router. There are various types and brands, but the steps are usually the same. The front of the router will show you various LED lights that display the status of your connection, but we'll explain that more later. Let's look at the back of the router. This is where we will make all of our connections. The WAN or Internet port on your router is where the flat black cable supplied by your installer plugs into. The switch ports, numbered 1 through 4, are where you plug in the cables that connect your computers, printers, or other Ethernet devices. Now before we make any connections, we want to make sure the router is not powered up. Be sure the supplied power cable that came with your router is not connected to it yet. Your router should have come with an Ethernet cable. It's usually a blue cable that comes in the box along with the router, the power supply, and the software. One end of this blue cable should be plugged into the number 1 port on the back of the router. It really doesn't matter which of the numbered ports it's plugged into, but since it's our first connection, let's use number 1. Now you'll need to access the back of your computer. Next, we take the other end of the blue Ethernet cable and plug it into the Ethernet port. This is often referred to as the NIC. This port can be at various locations on the back of the computer, but will always look like an oversized phone connection. It is the only spot that the blue cable can plug into. As with all the Ethernet connections, make sure the connection clicks when you push it in. If not, it may not make a good connection and may cause you problems when you try to get online. If you have any other connections for other computers, printers, or other Ethernet devices, follow these same procedures to connect them now. Now it is time to connect the Internet connection to the router. Take the flat black cable that we discussed earlier and plug it into the Internet port on the router. Remember, it is the connection that is a single port on the back of the router. Now that we have connected the router to the computer and the Internet connection to the router, let's connect the router to the power. Take the small round end of the power cable and plug it into the router. The small round connection can only plug into one spot on the back of the router. It is the only round connection and is located on the far edge of the router. We now need to make sure that there is power to the radio transmitter outside. On the power connector that we plugged into the back of the router, you'll see a thin black cable that tees off of the little black box. Remember the one labeled To Radio and To Computer? Follow that thin black cable to where it plugs into an electrical outlet or power strip. Here you will see a transformer that is usually plugged in by your installer. If not, please plug it in now. Most, but not all units will have a small LED light that indicates power. Now we need to power up the router. If you just plugged in the radio power, wait about 1 minute before plugging in the power to the router. Take the other end of the power cable for the router and plug it into an electrical outlet or power strip as well. On the front of the router, you should now see a series of lights beginning to show life. The various lights will differ depending on which version of router you have, but the basics are all the same. You will have a power light that will be lit and solid once it has completed its cycle. You'll also see an Internet light. This light isn't always labeled as Internet, but sometimes just a small symbol that indicates a global connection. This light will flash randomly if it has a connection. There are also a series of lights that are labeled 1 through 4. These correspond with the numbered ports on the back of the router. Only the ones that you have plugged a device into should be lit or flashing. Now that we have made all the necessary connections, it's time to see if we can get online. It is not necessary to run the included software in order to get connected. The majority of our network is set up to use DHCP, or automatic IP addressing. This is how the router is also configured when it leaves the factory. Now log on to your computer and open your Internet browser. In the address line, type in www.skybeam.com, then hit Enter. You should now see our web page. This completes our connection of the Linksys router to our Internet connection. For further assistance with setting up wireless, security, static IP addresses, or custom routing, please consult the owner's manual or the Linksys website. Thank you for watching, and thank you for choosing Skybeam High-Speed Internet Service.